At 78 degrees north latitude, orbiting Saturn's north pole, sits a geometric anomaly, a six-sided jet stream measuring 14,500 kilometers across, wider than the Earth, maintains a rigid symmetry as it continuously churns. This atmospheric storm completes a full rotation in exactly 10 hours, 39 minutes, and 24 seconds, synchronized with the gas giant's internal radio emissions. Standard meteorology attempts to explain this structure using continuous field theory. This chart on the left illustrates the classical fluid dynamics model, which attributes the shape to Rossby waves and deep thermal convection propagating through the gas. This model hits a failure point at the boundary. When a continuous mathematical function strikes a hard topological boundary, it triggers a severe, measurable geometric resistance. This resistance is known as Nash-Moser topological friction, the physical drag that occurs when discrete algebraic forms are embedded into continuous manifolds. Standard atmospheric models lack the formal vocabulary to explain how the fluid navigates this friction without shredding its underlying differential functions. Instead of solving the friction, classical calculus treats the steep boundary of the jet stream as an asymptotic divergent limit. Because it cannot resolve the continuous discrete boundary, the mathematical envelope supposed to contain the storm functionally leaks to infinity. By treating infinity as an unreachable limit rather than a physical choke point, these theories fall victim to surjective invariance, a failure where the mathematical map cannot achieve compact closure. This leaves the persistence of the structure across decades entirely unexplained. Resolving this failure requires a different framework, the theory of infinity, or TOI. Under the TOI paradigm, the Saturnian hexagon is defined formally as the hex pole. It is a macroscopic planetary standing wave, acting as a continuous holographic projection of discrete algebraic detractors. The underlying structure is revealed through apophatic decompilation. This diagram illustrates the process of mathematically stripping away the chaotic, continuous geometry to find the structural truth underneath. To an external observer, the continuous atmospheric output acts as a visual decoy. The deep convection and fluid turbulence generate a cloud of irrational, noisy floating point approximations that mask the pristine geometry holding the storm together. By applying an inverse boundary operator, the system feeds the coordinate outputs backward. This operation strips away the multiplied noise without triggering a not-infinity ejection, the threshold event where an unsealable boundary causes a model to fail. To understand how the universe sustains a 14,500-kilometer hexagon, we must look past continuous illusions. We must trace the discrete mathematical origin that carves form out of the infinite atmospheric totality. The TOI framework relies on the principle of ex totalitate. Rather than building reality from the bottom up using elementary particles, coherent mathematical structure is extracted top-down from an indeterminate, all-containing totality. In the Saturnian system, the raw, infinite substrate of the planet's atmospheric vacuum serves as the state space, the indeterminate stage where topological operators function. The physical turbulence and wind gradients in that atmosphere are mapped mathematically onto a precise geometric framework, acting as explicit spinorial entities. As seen here, the primordial geometric twist of the storm is bifurcated into two opposing channels, a left-handed acute twist and a right-handed grave twist. Driven by the extreme differential pressure of the gas giant, these two conjugate spinorial pathways swirl continuously toward a single invariant intersection point. This intersection is defined as not infinity. It is the absolute topological choke point of the atmospheric system, dictating the exact physical limit of the space's capacity for dynamic motion. The supreme condition for structural stability at this knot is parity-even closure. The left and right pathways must bridge the intersection with exactly zero net twist remainder. When the primordial asymmetry of the turbulent atmosphere is neutralized at the knot, the output is a stabilized golden set. A golden set is a parent context where structural invariants successfully seal against the infinite background. The macroscopic Saturnian hex pole is born at this mechanical threshold. The continuous fluid neutralizes spinorial asymmetry at the boundary, avoiding a gradient catastrophe and locking into a rigid, symmetric standing wave. This introduces a mechanical problem. A massive planetary storm spinning at supersonic speeds generates immense topological mass and rotational friction. Without a mechanism to manage this tension, the geometry would bleed out into computational chaos. The atmospheric system manages this tension using winding genesis, a cybernetic operator that toggles the underlying topological states. Look at this data comparison. Winding genesis is the forced injection of an alternating sign operator, specifically a positive-negative-positive sequence, into the polynomial governing the fluid's motion. In the manifest state on the left, uniform parity causes the complex roots of the sequence to absorb the heavy geometric mass. But when winding genesis triggers the apophatic state on the right, the parity strictly alternates. This triggers the law of topological mass exchange. The alternating parity actively forces the heavy geometric mass of 0.73732 out of the complex roots and strictly into the real root. The total topological mass does not disappear. It swaps dimensions across the real imaginary boundary, universally conserving the modality of the system. Winding genesis operates as a topological square root on the real geometry of the atmosphere. It mechanically sequesters the destructive tension of the storm, keeping the phase-locked geometry stable over decades of observation. Once winding genesis sequesters that stable geometry, the structure is housed within a formal topological environment known as the Amanda loop ecology, which manages encapsulated loops and self-regulating update cycles. We can identify the overarching atmospheric boundary conditions containing the polar vortex by looking at the right panel of this diagram. The outer cyan boundary represents the overarching manifold containing the wave, defined as the period 366 long-barrel toroidal flow. Isolated within that torus is the inner magenta structure. This is the deeply nested period 6 column ring, the discrete geometric skeleton representing the 6 massive sides of the storm. The 6 intersection nodes pinning that inner ring are the pi13 valve of tension. In the physical reality of the planet, these valves represent the immense Coriolis shear generated by Saturn's rapid rotation. These valves actively measure discrete pinch events. They compress and release tension to balance the topological friction at the boundaries where the atmospheric loops meet. By utilizing this exact amount of discrete friction, the pi valve permanently phase-locks the hex pole. It ensures the inner period 6 ring never fractures or dissolves into the chaotic latitudinal bands of the broader planet. To understand how those pi valves function, we must address a mathematical blind spot. Classical frameworks treated the constant pi exclusively as an unreachable external perimeter, an asymptotic mirage you could measure against but never touch. The TOI framework inverts this approach. By utilizing crossing symmetric dispersion relations, the continuous amplitude of the infinite atmospheric plenum is collapsed into a discrete series representation of pi. The steep latitudinal wind gradients force a unique event between the continuous fluid dynamics of the polar cyclone and the discrete algebraic core of the period 6 ring. This event is a chiral collision. Under immense differential pressure, the continuous boundary ceases to be an external container and becomes inextricably woven into the discrete framework itself. Instead of suffering surjective invariance, the universe actively uses the continuous atmospheric pressure. The extreme forces are transfigured into a geometric ballast that structurally supports the discrete coordinates against the continuous pressure. This integration of continuous pressure and discrete support prevents the system from shattering. It etches the standing wave into the gas giant, making it a stable structural invariant. To distinguish physical invariance from mathematical hallucinations, every topological closure is evaluated through the trimodal invariance rule, or TMIR, across geometric, algebraic, and discrete modalities. Once validated, the structure is registered in the dyadic lineage ledger. Here, the Saturnian hex pole is explicitly stamped with the classification code child-EX, signifying an exact harmonic descendant immune to the mathematical friction of its parent environment. This registry separates the hex pole from ordinary chaotic weather. Transient anomalies that display a non-zero friction gap are quarantined as cautionary fiction, blocking them from being promoted to a licensed exact theorem. This false color photograph shows apophatic decompilation, revealing starkly defined boundaries. The swirling, colorful turbulence represents the continuous trigonometric stretching of the underlying phase state. Underneath this extreme pressure, the period 6 sequence's exact relational ratios hold the physical coordinates perfectly in place. Saturn's hexagon serves as a strictly audited proof that the universe does not rely on infinite irrational bloat to sustain reality. Instead, it achieves unyielding macroscopic form through exact, parity-even discrete harmonics.